Hi everyone, it's M.S.G. I hope you're doing well. And today I'm going to be presenting my video, The Chaos Space Marines Winners and Losers of the Balanced Dataslate. It is dated for the 18th. I am aware that the Balanced Dataslate came out, I believe it was on the Wednesday, which is the 16th. So I've had about 1 to 2 days of time to collate my thoughts and give my impressions on which units I think are great, which units I think have prospered a lot better than they should have done, and those, unfortunately, that were nerfed. But with that said, let's continue. So before the video starts, I have been requested by a couple of commenters to show some miniatures that I've completed for my own personal collection for Empress Children. Um, Here are the most recent ones that I've done. So there's as you can see, there's a Helbrute. Again, he's not particularly the greatest model at the minute, but I'll explain that why. Either way, I still think he's quite fun to play. And I've also made a Empress Children Chaos Lord with a Lightning Claw and a Power Maul, which is supposed to substitute for uh, a Demon Hammer. Next, I also have a Empress Children Legionary, which is just a guy with a heavy bolter. I just figured, heavy guns are always cool, so why not make one? And my magnum opus, the 10 brick of Terminators, as I've mentioned in previous videos, a majority of my playstyle relies on heavy Terminators, and I love bringing the big 10-man squads, so I figured I'd get one of those painted up as soon as possible. Back onto the video though. So, how has the balanced data slate changed Chaos Space Marines? Overall, of the impression of the changes has been great. Genuinely, a lot of the units that we use have got points cuts, aside from two, which I will explain later on. And you probably know what these are. If you have seen the data slate, you probably know which the big two are. Um, as for that, though, our demon allies have received pretty much no changes. So I believe it was literally just Shalaxi and the Beast of Nurgle that got a points cut, and the Renmaster on the Blood Throne, because it's an incredibly strong model, got a points increase, especially for Corn Demons. Very, very strong, which again doesn't surprise me. Chaos Knights received nothing but points cuts, which is great. So Brigands are now 165, which is fantastic. You can bring one of those in your army if you feel like you need the extra firepower. Brigands, from my own personal experience, are very, very good. Their rule of having -1 AP at the closest target added on is really strong. So it brings up that Strength 6 cannon -1 to -2. And the multi-melter, the Demon's Breath multi-melter, or whatever it's called, to AP -5, which is a bit excessive, if you ask me. But anything with a 2-up and no invul doesn't get a save now, which is fantastic. Furthermore, the Big Knights also got a points cut. They could do with a bit more, in my opinion, because obviously the War Dogs in a lot of competitive play tend to be the better choice, simply due to the fact that you can bring quite a lot of them. The Big Knights will hopefully someday get their moment in the sun. Other factions that were top performers, like the Sisters of Battle and Thousand Suns, got weaker, and strong factions like the Blood Angels, Black Templars, and Drakari also followed suit. So, as I've put here, it's always nice to get stronger via a mission. So, obviously, we've had a sub 50% win rate. I believe it was at 48 the last time I checked. But the top players in the world, as I'm sure people are aware, with Liam VSL, are winning tournaments with the faction. So we're still a very high skill ceiling army that we have gotten better over. But we have got better overall, and the points cuts are just a very, very welcome change for a majority of the Space Marine side. We'll get onto the losers later on. So the video is going to be structured as similar to the previous ones. So I'm going to list a few runners up, which I think have benefited from the changes, or haven't received direct changes but have benefited generally. But they don't dedicate a full-on warranted look. Although I still do go into quite a lot of detail with them. In addition, I'm going to be basing each unit, regardless of if they're a runner-up, winner, or loser, on the most optimal detachment. So, for example, you're going to find that out. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's pretty obvious to only use the strongest potential detachment for that particular unit to gauge it fairly and objectively. Excuse me. And furthermore, I will also include a brief description on how to use the unit, or if what I feel is relevant, how they are normally used in competitive play. So feel free to pause the video at any point, as there's quite a lot of text, so you might want to just pause it and read it instead of hearing me talk over it, if you feel like you're going to learn better that way. But with that said, disclaimer, as mentioned in previous videos, this video is heavily based on my opinion and personal experiences. I am aware that I can get things wrong and have a massively different viewpoint to other people, but I will try and be as objective and as impartial as possible, which is difficult to do, especially with being human. You're obviously going to have biases. Furthermore, there just because I think a unit is on the losers or winners tier list doesn't make them an auto include or a terrible unit, and I'll usually give pretty sound reasoning as to why I have made each decision and where each individual unit has been ranked. But with that said, let's proceed on to the runners up. So just before a disclaimer, I haven't written this down, but the structure of the video is going to go runners up first, and then it's going to rotate between loser, winner until we've got to the top ones, basically. So, and also, for those who are unaware, the background art, if you're wondering, is Fallen Preyer's stage from Guilty Gear Strive. Very beautiful background, great wallpaper material. I definitely recommend giving them a look if you are so inclined to do so. But yeah, let's go. So first up are Raptors. Raptors have received a very particularly weird cut. So we do have them at 180 now. And now their current cost is still 100. Well, the 10 man is now 170. So at the moment, Games Workshop with this balanced data slate, they've made a few weird decisions, and by that I mean they're deciding to make it so either smaller squads get the points cuts or larger squads. So obviously the Raptors at a squad of 5 are still 90 points, which is still pretty good. However, the 170, in my opinion, is just you're not going to bring 10 Raptors. You're just not. Unless you're running like a very thematic Dread Talons list, like I've mentioned here. So I'll just read ad verbatim. So I put Raptors are still a very playable unit, in my opinion. They're not going to win you any tournaments single handedly, but you'll never bring 3 squads unless you're running a thematic Dread Talons list. Generally, they will be very helpful when it comes to scoring secondaries, and they are decent enough skirmishers into a majority of things. Some people like the Fat Archon, so please check him out, by the way. Fat Archon is a fantastic content creator. He does a lot of Warhammer stuff, but he mainly focuses on Chaos, so Chaos Demons and Chaos Space Marines, which is nice to see. So please give him a check out if you haven't already. He, in his videos that I've seen, swears by Raptors as top tier, but as I've mentioned here, I respectfully disagree. Raptors are, if I was to rank them, I'd put them at like B or C. I think they're okay. I don't think they're bad at all, but they're just not remarkable. Either way, it's up to personal preference. Some people will swear by them. Like I said, Archon does. They are not a bad unit at all. They're still very good for utility. In a unit of 5, you can throw them up an objective, get 12 inches on movement, which is great. So you can move into different quadrants of the map if you need to, or get on an objective really quickly if you need to score that. But there are other alternatives to them, so it's not too bad. But I don't believe that it's big enough to see them brought more than they already are. Like I've said there, the most versatile way of running them is 5-man squads to screen, harass chaff units, or harass backline objective holders. So, for example, if it's a mirror match, majority of the time, people are going to put a unit of cultists or some form of 5-man legionary squad if they are going to do that on the back line. These guys can run in and they will do they'll probably kill the cultists, and they'll probably do a lot of damage to the legionaries, because I do believe that I think the legionaries will hit harder, but I think the Raptors have the ability to just run in, battle shock them, potentially kill the unit if they roll hot. But in my matchup, the Legionaries win that melee matchup. But my point is that these guys are great at doing what they do. They're a utility unit, and you can screen with them pretty decently if you've got the gameplay / terrain knowledge, because obviously they've got the fly keyword. They can do what they want. But a 10-man choice, a 10-man squad is just a tech choice. Next up is the Predator Annihilator, not to be confused with the Predator Destructor. So it's a 10-inch move, toughness 10, 11 wound, 3 up armor, 3 OC for 130 points now. I think that's very good value. It's back to pre-balanced data slate tanks, which were great. 140 points is still pretty good, but I think the 130 range is just too great. Like, it is genuinely such good value for money. So we do have very good anti-vehicle monster damage options, and this model is definitely one of them. So instead of bringing other units, you can bring this and slap it in. It's toughness 10, like I've said, 11 wounds. It's not going to tank like Dart Lancers 24/7, but it's enough for small arms fire and even like medium fire to just bounce off it. Uh, but you're not really that bothered if it dies because, again, it's 130 points. A majority of our vehicles are priced roughly around that time. At that time, that price range, so it's not too much of an issue. I do think the Destructor is better in general in terms of variety, like it can adapt to a lot more situations than the Annihilator. But I still think that the Annihilator maybe brought one, maybe in a list if you've got the points left over. Personally, a lot of the time they go, "Oh, bring the Destructor because you get the extra AP and the auto cannon's great." So you've got AP2, potentially AP -3, or AP4 if you use the Death Hex if their enemy's on an objective, and if the enemy unit you're targeting is infantry, you get an extra 3 AP on everything that you have for the guns on that thing, which is nasty. But I think this guy is, especially now, you can bring 3 of these for 390 points and save 30 points from if you were going to bring Disruptors, and you can use that 30 or 20 points that you've saved to buy an enhancement for a character, because I know a majority of the time the enhancements are between 10 to 25 points, so you've got that. But this guy is a tech choice. Again, uh, he kills heavy vehicles and monsters. So his las cannon, the big one, is the strength 14 -3 AP D6 +1 with twin linked. So you're mostly wounding T12 and T13 vehicles like Land Raiders and Lord of Skulls on threes. So instead of wounding them on fours, which is the big selling point for the Land Raider, that -1 to wound on a las cannon shot is really, really good. This just ignores it. So you still do have the 2 normal las cannons, so you will be wounding them on the T13 on 5s and the Land Raider on 4s, but a majority of the time you do get to reroll damage rolls of 1 against the vehicle and monster units, which is great. This thing does hit really hard, I'll be honest. I think it's very, very easy for this thing to actually do quite a lot of damage. The auto cannons are more applicable because las cannons in general are just really good, but I think that extra strong las cannon gives it that big punch where you want to do a decent amount of damage to something, and this thing can do it. Uh, Again, though, it's a tech choice. It's there if you have a matchup where they're bringing a lot of knights, they're bringing a lot of big vehicles or big monsters like Tyranid Monster Mash list, demons, for example. This guy's quite good into demons because he's just so durable, and he's great against monsters. But the points cost efficiency on him's really good. Like, he's, for what you get and what you pay for, is very good. However, it loses effectiveness. It's very similar to one of the winners on this list, actually, which I'm not going to spoil, but they lose effectiveness as the vehicles and monsters of the enemy goes down. But the reason as to why you bring them is simply because of the fact that you are there to kill monsters. They're very bad into infantry, which is probably why the Disruptor's better, because you've got the anti-infantry and the anti-tank. Not as big as anti-tank as the Annihilator is, but the Destructor's also got the auto cannon, which is good for killing, like 3 wound infantry like Terminators and their variants. But overall, I still think you might see a Predator Annihilator in a list just as a tech choice if you need the anti-tank. Next up, as I mentioned previously, the Helbrute. Helbrute is the same price, but I think that because Abaddon's gone down by 15 points, he is a lot more appealing in pack bound. So lethal and sustained hits obviously go off on a 5 up, and you get both with the ability of the Helbrute. So if you're within 6 inches, this guy gives you lethal hits if you chose sustained, and sustained if you chose lethals. In addition, Abaddon also has the full rerolls to hit. It's the old school combo of Helbrute, Abaddon, Castle next to him. You get 4 rerolls to hit and double dart packs on 5 ups, which is actually wild how much damage that thing does. Next is, I do think the reason why he's a runner up is because he is not particularly great in the other detachments. He's not bad, but I think he is better when he's ran with Abaddon. And I also think he's better in pack bound because, like I've said here, it's an increased 16% chance of successful hits with your dart packs, because every increment on a d6, every number of 1 is 16%. So instead of getting a 16% chance, which probably goes up with reroll hits if you're fishing for sixes, the chances base kit for getting a 5 or a 6 is 32% on a dice. So having full rerolls to hit, even if it's against, even in veterans, it's actually quite good if you focus a hatred down, which you should be. You can get this guy next to a majority of the units you're wanting to shoot them with, and then boom, you're fishing for 5s and 6s, which is usually something you want to do, especially if you get double bang for your buck. So, for example, if you put in this guy next to tanks, they do get uh, auto wounding las cannons or auto wounding anti tank shots, and then an additional one, which in a majority of the circumstances, due to the fact that las cannons and even Helbrutes, even the Helbrute itself, sorry, has the twin link las cannon, which is great. Uh, as well as like Vindicators, for example, you can re-roll your hits with them, so you can potentially get Mark and Nurgle Vindicators that hit on 3s, re-rolling all hits, exploding 5s, auto wounding on 5s. It's genuinely insane how much damage this does. However, this thing is very hard to run. So there's times where I've played, for example, against my good friend Niall. He played, I believe it was Ultramarines, and he had a Redemptor Dreadnought or some variant. I don't particularly know. One shot this thing with a plasma. Just one shot it, just straight up deleted it. This thing doesn't have an invul save. It's only a 2-up armor. It's only toughness 8, I believe, and has 9 wounds and just dies to anything. And he's also quite bulky, so he's difficult to hide. However, in my opinion, this guy, it requires a lot of skill to play well with. Like, you can't just pick him up and play him. He does take positional awareness. You've got to be on your game to play this guy. Otherwise, like I've done previously, just get shot off the board. If he does get into melee, though, which is why I've done a bit of spitballing here, he probably will kill whatever he's in melee with. Like, I run him with the ectoplasma cannon and the hammer, as the picture's shown here, because I think it looks coolest. But I think the hammer is great, but it is very swingy. So you've got 5 attacks that hit on 4s instead of 3s, because obviously it's a heavy weapon. Strength 14, which is great into tanks, -3 AP, D6 plus 1 damage. It's pretty good, and if you spike damage, you can pretty much turn a repulsor into a tin can. Alternatively, as a commenter, I forgot their name at this particular instant, pointed out in one of my videos, you can run the Helbrute Fists for 7 attacks. These are, actually, I'd probably prefer running the Fist, because simply due to the fact that you might sacrifice a ranged weapon, which is a big thing, but if you want to run consistent melee damage, this is the thing. So you get 7 attacks hitting on 3s this time. Strength 12, -2, 3 damage flat. This is great into Terminators, because you're wounding on 2s, forcing them to an invul save a majority of the time, unless they're running Armor of Contempt, and any failed save is a dead Terminator. In addition, you can also get, I think it's a Heavy Bolter or a Flamer on each individual fist. So you can just slap 2 heavy flamers on it, like the gentleman in the comments mentioned previously, and you get 2d6 shots at strength 5, -1 AP, 1 damage with ignores cover. So on an Overwatch thing, that's really good. But they mentioned that if you run it with the Veterans of the Long War, you can use the Black Crusade, which I believe is you ignore cover and you get max shots on your flamers. I probably got the wrong stratagem there, but I'm not going to revise it. But you get max shots on your torrent weapons, so that's 12 shots at strength 5, -1 AP, 1 damage, ignoring cover anyway. So for 2 CP, if you're willing to pay that and Overwatch, you're probably going to do quite a lot of damage to whatever it is you're shooting at. Despite it only being 12 inches, a majority of the time people do not want to get overwatched by flamers. I personally myself hate going against flamers because they're so goddamn reliable. Even if it's like a Helbrute, for example, in one of my games, I had a Terminator squad, and I know for a fact that they're not really going to do that much damage, but a 5-man or 2 5-man units of Infernus Marines are not exactly appealing to fight, because you don't want to automatically lose a boatload of stuff, possibly, because I'm notorious for rolling ones for saving throws, so uh, it's definitely something for your opponent to consider. If it's against like Eldar, this thing just melts them, literally. It's ridiculous. So if you've got 130 points to spare, you have other options to bring instead of the Helbrute, but if you want to play that castle style of play, which is what Chaos Space Marines are infamous for, where the big, scary, centralized, just Death Star, you can. Alternatively, if you want to switch this guy out for the Predator Annihilator, because now they're both the same cost for anti-tank damage, you can do. It's personally, it's dealer's choice at the end of the day. I do love the Helbrute. I think the Helbrute is fun to use, but I definitely would bring him if you bring in Packbound or if you bring in uh, Veterans of the Long War. I think this guy is. If you bring in Packbound or Abaddon, I think you can probably just run this guy. You're probably going to need to run this guy instead of a Predator Annihilator or a substitute. But again, dealer's choice. I love the Helbrute though. So last but not least, I never thought I'd say this, but the Lord Discordant, he actually got a points cut. So he's now 175 points instead of 190. I still think he does need a rework, but points cuts are the way to go. It's very nice. So, as I've mentioned here, I feel his abilities are usually quite swingy or pretty poor in general. So, being within 12 inches means he's usually going to die getting there unless you bunny hop terrain, which means you're jumping from, uh, post to post, trying not to get shot. And he is quite hard to hide because he's a big model. Uh, and you rely on your opponent to potentially fail a leadership test to not shoot, which is huge if it does work. But a majority of the time, leadership test is just going to get passed, and it'll be -1 to hit. Some factions can get +1 to hit on the vehicles anyway, which counters it. Uh, but you can also give your entire army a brief reprieve. I should have finished that, but for some reason the presentation's just not working. But I did put you can also give your entire army a brief reprieve, which meant that if it does go off and the vehicle does not shoot, if it's into something like knights, for example, this thing is insane if it goes off because goddamn having that 420 point knight not shoot anything for a turn allows you to move up and set up for free pretty much, and then you turn it and you kill it. Basically, it's really really strong. But the problem with this guy though is his damage output is pretty piss poor for his points cost. So it's very anemic, as I've put here. So he's great into weaker targets and wonderful for bullying anything similar to a Space Marine stat line. So his Bale Flamer, in my opinion, is great. So it's D6 +3, ignores cover at strength 6 -1, 2 damage flat. So any failed saves from a Space Marine, just goodbye, you're dead. And then he charges the unit, +1 to wound on the Impaler Chainglaive at 4 attacks. So he's hitting on 2s at strength 6, -2, 2 damage each, wounded on 2s anyway, because he's strength 6. Sorry, he's wounded on 2s because what normally he'd be wounded on 3s, but because +1 to wound because of Lance on the Chainglaive, wounded on 2s, followed by 4 flat attacks on 3s by the Bladed Limbs at strength 6, -1 AP, 2 damage, which is not too bad. You can also choose 2 shots on the Magma Cutter, which is 2 shots at strength 9, -4 AP, D6 damage. Obviously, you get the Melter keyword for that if you're within half range, which is, I think because it's 9-inch range, it's like 5 or so inches that you need to be within half. So it's like 4-inch range. You basically have to be bang next to him to get that extra 2 flat damage. Alternatively, you can run the Technovirus Injector with 1 attack, which hits on 3s at strength 3, -3. AP, 2 damage flat, but it does have anti-vehicle +2. So, because it's extra attacks, unfortunately, the Bladed Limbs and the Technovirus Injector don't benefit because it's classed as extra attacks. You can't Dart Pact them. So, in my opinion, it's probably best to run the Magma Cutters due to the fact that you get more shots and you're probably going to be wounding what you're fighting on like 2s or 3s the majority. Well, 3s or 4s the majority of the time anyway. Um, but in my opinion, in Renegade Raiders, this guy shines. I think he's very good, or he's usable now, rather. I don't think he's like top tier, but I think he's definitely in a lot better places. So it's mainly due to the fact that he has the mounted keyword. It benefits from a lot of the Renegade Raider stratagems. So, for example, the base kit extra AP on objectives usually counters Armory Contempt. So, for example, if your Bale Flame is shooting into Space Marines, you're ignoring cover for -1 AP, so they'd be up to a 4 up. If they want to pop Armory Contempt, they're on the 3 up. But if they're on the objective and the pop Armory Contempt, you can just use that and be like, right, okay, I've got extra AP, so you're bringing it up. If they don't want to use it, it's AP -2, which means that the unit's saving on a 5 up instead of a 4. But it's just very, very good. In addition, you can also use this in a very weird tech choice where if you want to shoot a big unit of Space Marines that are on the mid-board objective and you want to kill them, you can put Cypher next to them make them say, oh, if you take Armor of Contempt, I'm going to make it cost 2 command points on a Bale Flamer. Cypher's nearby, gives it that +1 to the increase on the stratagem, and then it's a Faustian Gambit. Like, you're not going to win pretty much any situation. You're forcing them to waste resources. And they'll probably just say no, so then you get AP -3. Sorry, AP -2 on your Flamer, which is fantastic. In addition, he also gets the Advance and Shoot base kit, which is great because obviously all his weapons have Assault. And he also has the opportunity to move a quite frankly ridiculous distance due to the potential for the tier 1 charges. You can run him with the enhancement. I forgot what it's called, but it gives you free rerolls to hit and wound if you're within 12 inches of an opponent's deployment zone, which is fantastic on this guy because he does hit. Even if his damage output's pretty bad, he does full rerolls to hit and wound. Basically means his damage output goes through the roof, which is great. However, he's pretty good as a distraction Carnifex if you're not too concerned with Assassinate. And in addition, you can have your entire army reroll once to wound against one vehicle a turn if it's within 12 inches. So he can point this to, I don't know, a repulsor or something. He rushes in, points at the repulsor and goes, right, you are now reroll once to wound from everything. So, for example, if you've got a las cannon squad waiting to shoot and they roll ones, congratulations, you can reroll them. So it's nice to have. But let's get on to the loser. First up is the Heldrake. So again, Games Workshop have just left this guy to die for some particular reason. I don't know why, because the Heldrake is an amazing model. As you can see, I mean, who doesn't want a Cyber Dragon on your team? It's just so fucking cool. 205 points is something that is, quite frankly, they're on drugs if you think you're paying 205 points for this thing, because it's way too expensive. It's toughness 9, 12 wounds, 3 up armor, 5 up invul, and it's just really good into fly units, but a majority of the units in the game don't have fly. That's not to say this isn't bad, because some stuff you do think has the fly, doesn't have the fly keyword, does. So this is where he comes in. So the Baleflamer and the Heldrake claws are actually quite good. So it's a D6 plus 3 shots, which ignore cover at strength 6 -1 2 damage, which is great. And you also get 5 attacks hitting on 3s, strength 7 -1 2 damage flat with anti-fly and dev wounds, which means, as per the ruling, the dev wounds will go off on a 2-up if you target in a fly unit, which is great. That just literally shreds anything with the fly keyword. You also get +1 to hit as well, so you'd be hitting on 2s if you're going into a fly unit. Majority of the time you're hitting on 3s though. But with Renegade Raiders, obviously you get the extra AP. So Space Marines are saving on a 5-up majority of the time, and if they fail a save, they are now compost. They just get burned to death and just don't get a chance to, do anything. I have written a proposed rework, as you can see here. So if you want to pause and take a look at this, I will be running through it quickly. So I've proposed that they go from 140 to 150. You could switch this to higher or lower, but I feel like for what I've reworked them into, I wanted to take advantage of the fact that these are a very hard hitting. They're not supposed to last. You just throw them at the enemy and you just go, right, let's deal with it. They have to deal with that. They can't ignore it. So I've kept the stat lines the same. So they'll be costing 140 or 150 points. So their ability changes. I've added 2 new abilities and I've updated one of them. So Airborne Predator still stays the same. You get +1 to hit against flying units or models, and models with the fly keyword. In addition, enemy models within the with the fly keyword must have to take a desperate escape test when making a fallback move if it has been within engagement range of the Heldrake. This is so it keeps the niche of being an anti-air monster, but doesn't spill over into being too strong against infantry. This does work against fly infantry though. So for example, the idea was that it latches onto whatever's flying and it will not let go. So when the enemy tries to run away, it gets shredded. Like it's trying to pull a sword out of you. Like it's not going to end well. You're still going to take some damage. This would be great into Eldar, because the majority of the stuff for the Eldar do have fly. So if you want to pin these bikers down, this thing can run them down, cash them at a position, get +1 to hit, start shredding them. They might pop rainbow saves. They go, oh shit, we're in combat with a Heldrake. Time to fall back. They failed the desperate escape test on a couple of the models, and you've just killed way more than you need to, which is great. Next up, we have Supersonic Devastation, which means that any unit shot by the Bale Flamer of the Heldrake must take a Battle Shock test. Units after this are unable to take another Battle Shock test from another Heldrake for this turn. So the reason as to why I've done this is so you can shoot a unit that's on an objective, potentially get a Battle Shock on that, or run to the backline objective, shoot the unit, get them Battle Shocked, and then charge into them. So then you get that objective next turn. But the limitations for fairness reasons, because if you have 3 units that are just forcing battle shot, the same unit that's forcing a battle shot test from 3 or 2 Heldrakes, is just a bit annoying. But it allows you other army sources, so for example, Noise Marines and Raptors or something like that, where it forces them to take a battle shot test. They can still do that if they wish to do so. Finally, the last ability is Covetous Abomination, which means if the Heldrake chooses to hover when instructed to in the declare battle formation step, it gains 2 OC for the remainder of the battle. So the idea is that this thing can run straight past your opponent's army unless they've screened it, and you basically just shred the backline objective and capture it, and you can actually contest objectives now. Because the main thing with the Heldrake, for those who were trying it, was you'd run back to the end of the battlefield, you'd kill whatever you're in combat with, because the majority of the time it was just shitty cannon fodder units that couldn't do anything, or something that was absolutely terrible in melee but was very good at shooting. You'd kill that and you wouldn't capture the objective because you had no OC. This is to remedy that, because I think 2 OC is not too high. I think even if it had 1 OC, you could probably put it to 1. But either way, I think it does need some form of OC if you go in for that harassing, shock style of gameplay, which I think the Heldrake would be very well suited to. And it also keeps the soul of the actual play style of being an anti-air menace, which is exactly what you need to do. So the winner, or one of the winners, if you notice, we've got 9 winners and 4 losers, which is great. Havocs have gone down to 125 points, which is fantastic. I think Havocs have been way too pricey. 135 points is too much for them. Nice to have a points cut. They're now the same cost as a squad of Chosen. So, for example, if you want heavy troops with, guns, you can bring these guys instead, or you can bring the Chosen if you want more melee / objective players. Again, it's up to you if you want into more shooting or more melee. It's, again, dealer's choice. This is why I love the game, because some people prefer shooting, some people prefer melee. You can choose how to build them, which is, again, perfect for Chaos Space Marines. So you can potentially spike the damage with these guys, and they do have a very good weapon variety. So I've written you can bring them with chain cannons. So just to preface this, the Sergeant does not get a heavy weapon. It's the subordinates that do. So you get 4 variants of whichever weapon you want. The Sergeant can be brought, I believe it's with a melt or a plasma gun. I usually bring them with a melter gun and a plasma fist. Plasma fist? Power fist. Plasma fist would be pretty sick, though. But yeah, so you've got the chain cannons, which are 32 shots at strength 5, no AP, 1 damage. Heavy bolters aren't too bad and can put in work against Space Marine and Votan troops because they are strength 5, -1 AP, 2 damage flat. They also have sustained hits 1 base kit, which is okay. The auto cannons are a personal favourite of mine. They're basically a tech choice into heavy elite infantry like Terminators and light vehicles, because you've got 8 shots at strength 9, -1 AP, 3 damage. So you're basically shooting at a Terminator. You get a 3-up armor save unless they pop armor of contempt. But then again, you force them to use a command point at that point. And then any fails, it's a dead Terminator because it's flat 3 damage, which is very, very good. And finally, probably the most commonplace way to run these guys is with las cannons. The majority of the time, you will see these guys with las cannons. So you've got your strength 12 -3 AP, D6 +1 damage. This is very, very good in Veterans of the Long War because you get the rerolls to hit. Pack bound is very good, so you slap these guys Mark and Nurgle past a leadership test, because I do believe these guys have an icon on the Sergeant. You're probably going to get sustained hit 5s. As I've mentioned in a very long time ago video, there was a game that I had with my friend Niall where I had 4 shots from the last cannons and I hit 5s and 6s, so I got 8 shots, which is, I'd never been that lucky before. So you're safe to say whatever it shot, I think it was a Forge Fiend, it shot the Forge Fiend, it basically just deleted it. You can run them with Renegade Raiders as well. So Renegade Raiders in general is probably, like I said, the majority of the time Renegade Raiders is the strongest attachment in my opinion. But extra AP, so you've got that extra AP if they're on an objective, so AP -4 on las cannons is spectacular, and you get advance and shoot. This synergizes really well with my next point, so they've got a rule called stabilization talons, which means that they hit on whatever ballistic skill they've got, so it'd be a 3-up. So no more -1s to hit, no more stealth. They hit on 3s constantly, and if you somehow can manage to get them to +1 to hit, they'd be hitting on 2s constantly. But either way, it's great into vehicles because the majority of the time, unless it's Eldar, I believe, you can get -1 to hit through smoking the tank. So if they pop smoke, you're making them waste a command point. But don't be that guy. If you say, look, if you pop smoke, it's not going to work. You get +1 to your save on smoke, though. So it's not the worst, but these guys just ignore that -1 to hit, which is great. And it's very reliable. The problem is, though, they're very easy to kill. So they are T5, which is nice. The T5 is a very good break point for a majority of the infantry in the game. However, heavy bolters and any 2 damage weaponry is just going to look at them. And again, they've only got a 3-up. Every loss is massive. So you can tank the sergeant losing because he just is he is the bodyguard to the unit, basically. You can tank 1 death. But if you kill a Havoc squad or even put it to half, you're gimping their damage output massively because you're losing 2. Let's say I'm in a shooting phase and I lose 3 Havocs. I passed the battle shot test. I have lost the Melter, the Plasma, the Melter, the Power Fist, and 2 las cannons. That's half of my damage gone in one go. It's pretty scary. However, they lose their effectiveness as it goes on anyway, the game. So, for example, you will shoot, kill, do whatever you need to do. And this is the reason why the Predator tanks are really good for this, the one with the auto cannon. The Destructor has the anti-infantry capability after it's blown up tanks. The Havocs do not. So the Havocs, you can run them with 2 las cannons or 2 auto cannons or chain cannons, but a majority of the time, you're wanting them to be ran with the same weapon. So yeah, you can bring Havocs. You could bring to potentially remedy this. You could spend 250 and get like 2 squads of Havocs with 2 las cannons and 2 auto cannons or chain cannons. Then that way you've still got some anti-infantry, and it's like 32 shots still, and you've got the squad size differences. But again, these guys are quite easy to kill, so they do lose their effectiveness as the game goes on. But I don't think that necessarily means that they're a bad unit at all. I still think they're very, very usable in casual games. Uh, I do think they deserve more of a points cut, though. I think possibly bringing them to 115 would definitely make these guys very appealing because 4 las cannon shots for 115 points is a steal. It's super, super good. But then that lies in the point of, does it make everything else worse by default? Either way, you can still bring these guys. I still think Havocs are a very, very, very solid unit that are very well balanced for what they do. They're a tech choice. You kill whatever you need to kill. They're not too difficult to kill due to the fact that they're a lot harder to, find, and you can put them in buildings and get plunging fire for extra AP if you're running like anti-infantry stuff. But again, they are a very, very good unit. I still think they've benefited a lot from the changes. So a lot of people seem to think so too, which is great. Next up, the Demon Prince with wings. So this guy is. It's sad because Demon Princes are well in 8th edition when I started playing Demon Princes were ludicrously fun to play. They were the best pick you could do because they had just really good melee, the reroll ones, within 6 inches to hit, which is really, really good. God, I miss 8th edition. But that being said, they're still too expensive. 190 points base kit is still, for something that is as big, because the Demon Prince model it's fantastic. It looks so good, but god damn it, it's huge. Like it's insanely easy to find it and to shoot it, simply due to the fact that the wings are around and they're massive. They're great in casual games, though. Like I said, they're very fun and you can make them work. But in competitive lists, they're not particularly great. If I was to give them a change, I'd probably lower the points cost of both variants, and I'd make them strength 10. I wouldn't lower them too much because obviously, it's still quite tanky. These guys do shrug off a lot of firepower. Like the T9 and T10 uh, models do shrug off heavy bolters pretty reliably. But I think making them strength 10 base kit gives them that massive improvement, because at the moment the only thing that you can do to get strength 10 is Corn. It gets +2 strength. Give them a 10-point cost reduction for each variant. Strength 10 base kit would make them competitive, because then that way you're wounding elite infantry on 2s, which you should be doing because you're a fucking Demon Prince. You should be absolutely mullering at heavy infantry because you're a giant demon. You'd be wounding Terminators on 2s, and then anything that goes through that they fail the 4-up invul, they just die. You also get Slanesh. So, for example, the way I would run it, I'd have Marcus Slanesh, Intoxicating Elixir for the 5-up Feel No Pain, which is fantastic. Like I've mentioned, if you're running Pack Bounds, you want to run it with the Elixir. Where is it? Like 14-inch movement, advance and charge, or advance shoot and charge, because he's still got a heavy bolter which you can use, and then you charge into something with the mortal wounds ability, which is great. That the mortal wound ability on the Winged Demon Prince is really good. But I do think they just need a bit extra in order to be competitively viable. Demon Princes, again, like I've said, everyone loves the Demon Princes. They are a fantastic model. They are fun to play. They're a good missile unit where you just throw it at something and it's probably going to do a decent amount of damage. But at Strength 8, I think it's genuinely atrocious. It should be Strength 10 minimum. And yeah, I that's the change I'd make from. I think the slight points cut, Strength 10 base kit, done. That's it. They're still good. I'd also change the abilities on the Demon Prince without wings, but we'll get onto that in a different video. So, second winner is Possessed. Possessed have been a bit of a contentious topic, as I've previously mentioned in other videos that I've done, and I've got a decent amount of controversy from that. People were like, "Oh my god, Possessed are great," and I respect that, and I do agree. Possessed are very, very good. I think they're even better now, which is fantastic. So, unfortunately, they got nerfed originally. So they had the rule where when they dark pacted, they could get they got dev wounds on whatever it is that they dark pacted against. So the common way to run them, which is the way that you still run them now, is Mark of Slanesh in pack bound, torpifying refrain for a command point for advance and charge, run into whatever you get on the objective, and then you basically just melt it. With dev wounds, because there were a way to get advance and charge or run them up with undivided, for example, and get profane zeal. So you can still do that. But I do think that fishing for the 2 dev wounds and full rerolls, you could do like, I think on average it was like with a 10-man unit, you could get like 22 dev wounds. It was like a ridiculous amount of damage. But like I said, the problem is they occupy a niche which Warp Talons can usually do, but I still think they're a very potent melee threat. So the Warp Talons have got more maneuverability. They're a 3-inch faster. They're way less tanky. They've got rerolls to wound base kit. These guys don't, but they do have dev wounds. They're just a very live. They're a scalpel, whereas the Possessed are a hammer. The Possessed run at something and bash it, whereas the Warp Talons sneak past everything, sneak up behind it, and stab it like 10 times in the back. In Pack Bound Zealots, obviously, I've mentioned they've got sustained hits on 5s and get advance and charge for a command point, but I think they're better in Renegade Raiders. So the melee that they've got is 4 attacks on 3s, strength 5, -1 AP, 2 damage. Strength 5's kind of shit, I'll be honest. They're just good into other infantry or other, like, somewhat heavy infantry, but the -1 AP is genuinely atrocious, so I think Renegade Raiders is great. So you throw these guys on the objective, they're now -2 AP, which is a lot better. You also get Armory Contempt with these guys too, with Unfailingly Obdurate, and you can also get Advance and Charge, and you get +1 to that charge if your opponent's on an objective, which is fantastic. You can also use Scour and Seize if you run them on the objective and there's a character that you really want to kill. You're probably going to get the character killed with the Possessed because they do throw a shitload of attacks out. If you really want the character dead, so for example, say someone like Marnius Calgar, you can just throw these guys at it, pop dev wounds, full rerolls to, hit, if, for example, if you're on an objective. Oh no, that's if you get out of a transport. Ignore me. You'd just basically be fishing for dev wound precision, and you'd just kill whatever it is that you're fighting against. You're probably going to do that. In addition, the nerf to the dev wounds was pretty bad. I don't think it should be a thing. Possessed were already pretty good. I think the change to the dev wounds was fucking stupid, in my opinion, to not put too fine a point on it. Once per battle dev wounds is crap because you get these guys. The regular melee damage isn't remarkable. It sounds like it is, but it's not. The dev wounds helped them because it was a case of, oh yeah, you'll get a few couple of hits in there that might bounce off, but then you get that one hit that does a shitload of damage and your opponent can't deal with it. So that's the big thing for me. I think that should just be brought back to the original. You get it if you dart packed, and plus they don't have any shooting, so you only dart packed it in melee. They're only a melee threat. But I still think if you run them Chaos Undivided with Profane Zeal, and you get that one big turn of damage, you still can get like quite a lot out of these guys. You can also bring him in a Land Raider. You can only bring 5 though because it counts as 2 per model if you really need to. So they are quite durable. So T6 3 wounds, 3 up armor and 5 up invul is actually pretty nice. Like Heavy Bolters just shrug off them on a 5. Flamers are good into them though because of the fact that it's just sheer amount of shots. But other than that, T6 3 wounds, 3 up armor, 5 up invul's great for what you get in 120 points. They do hit quite hard. If I were to make a change to them, though, just to give them that little bit extra, while I do think they benefited a lot from the balanced data slate, I think they need like +1 strength on the charge or something like, or just bring back the old Dev Wounds Reeve thingy where they got it every time they dart pacted because these guys would be a lot better. You play on paper, Possessed sound really good, and then you play them and they're not as strong. But I think Possessed, if you wanted to make them a lot more viable, bring back old Dev Wounds. Where it's once every time. Oh, not once per battle, but it's every time the dart packed. Again, AP1 isn't great, like I've mentioned, but Renegade Raiders and Pat Bound are probably the best ways to run these guys. But I do think you will be seeing Possessed. Possessed are good if you have the urge to foot slog these guys up. They are harder to get into combat than the Warp Talons, but they don't require CP for rapid ingress or deep striking. Well, you don't CP deep strike anyway, but you know they're a lot less intensive for CP unless you're running all the stratagems to get them into combat, which isn't too bad. But yeah, next up is the loser for the Dark Commune. So these are a staple, like I've said. They're still very, very, very powerful, but they've gone up by 15 points, which is pretty bad. So they're officially now the most expensive HQ, which Chaos Cultists commonly run. The Dark Apostle, I believe, is 75. The Firebrand is 45. And the other stuff, like the Traitor Enforcers, just no one's running the Traitor Enforcers. So let's just not kid ourselves. These guys are the most expensive one now. However, you do get what you pay for. These guys are really good still. They're going to be more expensive with enhancements. Again, the majority of the time you could run them with the Scout enhancement, which is where you put them with the Accursed Cultist, pay a bit extra for these guys to get the Scout enhancement, and then Scout 6-inch at the start of the game. Still really good though. They're also still susceptible to blast. So, like I've mentioned in other videos when I were reviewing them, full unit is 21 men or things rather, because cursed cultists are a bit more than that. 21 guys, which means blast weapons are going to get 4 extra shots base kit minimum. They're not particularly tanky despite the 5 up invul that they give. However, I do think that they're still very strong regardless though. But blast is a scary prospect into these dudes. The main reason, like I've said, why they're on this side is because of the points increase. It's like a 30 to 25% increase in their points overall. It's pretty bad. But yeah, so I still think you're probably going to see these guys in cultist lists because they are the best, in my opinion. So you get the +1 to wound, +1 to hit, advance and charge once per game. They are just they're a really strong unit still. Like they're very good. But again, the points costs overall, like I've said, if you're bringing 3 units of ACDC, which is a Cursed Cultist and Dark Commune, it's going to be a base kit 825 points, which is an insane amount of points. But it'll probably be bringing enhancements too, which is only the reason why it's base kit 825. It's probably going to go up. But I think the Dark Apostle exclusive Tainted Vigor amulet is definitely going to be more considered. So you're going to be bringing a Dark Apostle instead of the uh, Dark Commune in one of the Accursed Cultist blobs, I think you are definitely going to want to bring them back, because, like I said, bringing D3 models back per turn is just, it's wild. Especially seeing as granted, they don't have a 5 pinball when they're not ran with the Accursed Cultist, sorry, the Dark Commune, but Accursed Cultist base kit have a 6-up feel no pain anyway, and you've seen how good they are. Chaos Cultists are scary, but again, these guys unfortunately lose due to the points increase, but I still think they're very, very, very strong. Like, they're not bad at all. Next up, Legionaries. Legionaries got the Raptors treatment, where they got reduced as a 10-man, and they're still the same cost as a 5-man. So the Raptors and Legionaries at the moment cost 5. 5 of them cost 90. 10 of them cost 170. So again, they were an already auto include. Every list we're running Legionaries because they're just exceptionally strong, but they're now a lot better in units of 10. So for example, if you run them in a 10-man unit with the Chaos Lord, you now save 10 points, which is great. I know, well, I'll explain. So they're just an extremely versatile unit, as I'm sure many people are aware. They can shoot 1 to 2 unique special weapons depending on the squad size, and have great melee with 2 heavy melee weapons and rerolls to wound of 1 off the objective, but full rerolls if they're on it. They can be ran with a plethora of different characters, and massively increase their damage on utility too. So, like I said, you can run them with a Chaos Lord, Master of Executions. There's just so many different options you can run these guys with that make them really, really strong. So 10-man legionary squads benefit a lot more from stratagems, because obviously you're not spending 2 CP for 2 5-man units to get a stratagem unless you're running it with the Lord. So for example, they are now way better in Veterans of the Long War, because a majority of the time you bring in legionaries with a Chaos Lord, which means that you get -1 to any CP cost that you get through. So, for example, they get Armor of Contempt for free, which is great, especially on a 10-man, because you want the Chaos Lord in that unit with the War Master's Gift to be running in, getting full rerolls to wound on an objective, and critting on 5s with a Dev Wounds Hammer. It's pretty nasty, but that extra layer of durability is very good. They also benefit a lot from the free stratagems on the Chaos Lord too, in other detachments. But I think for Veterans of the Long War, because a majority of the stratagems in that detachment have 2 command points, you're going to get more out of it. So, for example, if your Focus of Hatred wants to charge you next turn, you pop the stratagem for fights first on these guys for a command point. So instead of the Chaos Lord fighting and the Legionaries fighting first, 5 Legionaries, you've got 10 Legionaries, which is, again, the full rerolls to wound, chainsword spam. You might get a couple of wounds through depending on what you're fighting, or you might absolutely shred whatever you're fighting. It's just extra bodies for pretty much 80 points, which I think is worth it in my opinion. So they do get diminishing returns, unfortunately, Legionaries. So while the majority of the time Legionaries are brought with 2 unique shooting weapons, 2 heavy melee weapons, and chainswords, the extra bodies offer far more OC on an objective and can act as a meat shield for your characters, which is what I mentioned. In addition to this, the 10-man blob is also a lot easier for screening due to the fact that the unit size is bigger. While it does make it more vulnerable to blast, the pros of a 10-man squad outweigh its cons. If I was going to give them a weakness, though, they are only T4 2 up armor. T4 2 wounds 3 up armor. They're quite easy to chew through. A majority of people already know how popular Space Marines in general are, and Chaos Space Marines are, so they're going to be bringing a lot of Strength 5 2 damage weapons like heavy bolters and stuff like that, or the equivalent. But either way, they're just really, really good still. Like the Legionaries do not stop winning. Like, they've gone from auto include to auto include. I don't understand why they've reduced the points cost of 10. I understand the logic behind it, because the majority of the time you were running 5 units, or units of 5 rather, across the board, because they're just really, really strong. But the way I run them as an Emperor's Children player is I run 10 with Lucius the Eternal, and the Master of Executions. So it's just the precision comes from Lucius, the precision comes from the Master of Executions, and the Legionaries with the heavy weapons and chainswords will do quite a lot of damage. But again, it's great. So, for example, I the previous game I had was a 5-man unit of Legionaries with Lucius and the Master of Executions. You're getting full rerolls to hit if you're wounding if the target's wounded or below starting strength. If it's half below starting strength, then you get full rerolls to wound, but you get that from the Legionaries anyway. If they're on an objective, Lucius and the Master of Executions Lucius fights into a unit of, who was it now? I can't quite remember, but he killed the unit basically. He absolutely shredded it, and then the Master of Executions fights Gilliman, spikes quite a lot of dev wounds and kills him, and Gilliman does not get back up. And then the rest of the Legionaries consolidate onto the objective, and we capture that objective. So, if for those who are unaware, you can run them now with 10. You probably want to run them with 10 still, but Lucius and the Master of Executions combo are scary. Another winner is the Terminators. So, as I mentioned previously, I do love my Terminators. I think Terminators are great. They've gone down by 5 points and 10 if you're bringing in a unit of 10. So it's 880 for 5 and 360 for 10. So you're saving 10 points at the minimum if you do bring that 10. If you run it with the Sorcerer, which is something I'm going to touch on later, the points cuts usually means you can get an enhancement for free elsewhere because you're saving up to 20 points, which is fantastic. I love seeing these guys do well. Terminators are so much fun to play. As I mentioned here, Terminators will deal a quite frankly ridiculous amount of damage in melee, less so at range, but it's not something you can just shrug off. A minimum of 3 power fists, 1 Reaper auto cannon or a heavy flamer, 1 paired accursed weapons, and 1 chain fist for a squad of 5. My personal loadout is a 10-man squad with 6 power fists, 2 Reaper auto cannons, 2 paired accursed weapons, 2 chain fists, and the rest have got combi weapons because you're shooting up the majority of the time. Into elite armies, combi weapons are better. Into chaff armies, especially if you're running veterans of the Long War, these guys want to be brought with combi bolters because you get eager for vengeance and the dev wounds strat, which allows you to get up to 6 dev wounds with bolt weapons, which is pretty nasty. They also get rerolls to hit base kit if they dart packed. So you get rerolls to hit in your shooting, and then if you dart packed in melee, you also get full rerolls to hit. Especially very, very potent in pack bound and extremely good in any other detachment, really, because full rerolls to hit with power fists and other heavy melee weapons is pretty fucking stupid, to be honest. It's really, really good. They're still very tanky, so they're T5, 4 up armor, T5, 2 up armor, 4 up invul, 3 wounds a pop. A majority of the time, you're just going to put these guys in the middle objective and just not die, and your opponent basically has to deal with them with shooting, and they take a shitload of attention to bring down. Because if your opponent, for example, if you're running Slanesh Terminators in Packbound, or if you're running Renegade Raiders, Advance and Charge Terminators are now on your doorstep, and they are now going to punch whatever you was shooting them, and they will probably kill it. Again, they're a good distraction. Like I've said, it forces your opponent to make a decision, ignore you and let them move around the table, killing everything in sight, or focus you down and allow the rest of your army to move up and do whatever they like with minimal harassment. Obviously, that's relative, but I do think that Terminators are very, very strong. And you might see a squad now, but I do think 10-man Terminator bricks are infamous for being fantastic, and that's great because I do love playing them. The problem with them is that they get worse as the better the player is. They get worse the better the player is. So they're still very slow. Each loss will hurt if you do, not well on the saves, which is something I'm infamous for. I'm never any good at saving with Terminators. And a good opponent's just going to put screens everywhere, and these guys are just going to have to, unfortunately, deal with that. That being said, though, I always bring 10 due to the sheer amount of threat level that they bring to the board. The different detachments make them a unit to suit a lot of situations, and they're just really fun to play. I think Terminators are, again, I'm going to gush about Terminators even more. They're just so, so fun. They do get less effective as the better the player is, but that doesn't mean that they're useless. If you're adept at using them, you can compensate for this. So, for example, if you know your opponent's going to screen, you might want to bring 2 units of 5 instead of 10 as a unit, because, you can get a lot of damage from a 10-man unit, and you do benefit a lot more from stratagems and vice versa. There are pros and cons to running 5-man units and 10-man units. 10-man units are a lot more rigid, but their rigidity comes strength. I sound like an Iron Warrior doing that, but my point is that if you want versatility, run them as 2 units of 5 if you're going to bring them, or 1 unit of 5. And if you want sheer damage and basically fuck you energy, run 10. They're fantastic. Next up, the man himself. Abaddon, the Despoiler, he got a 15 points cut. He's not. He's no longer 295 points. He's 280, which is great. Again, he was too expensive. Even after the Codex changed his abilities and arguably nerfed him, so the 280 points bracket actually makes him very, very usable now. I think you're probably going to see Abaddon quite a lot. Uh, he has had a rough time. He used to be able to lead Legionaries, but now they've changed it to Chosen. So you no longer get your full rerolls to wound. Instead, you get Advance and Charge, which is arguably better. Like I've mentioned, Advance and Charge on Abaddon without having to pay a command point is ridiculously good, especially in melee, because obviously, I mean, Abaddon in melee, you're not surviving Abaddon with melee. He's disgusting when it comes to Dracnian, Talon of Horus if you want to re-roll all them wounds, which you can get because he's unfortunately mark locked to Undivided. So like I've said, when he's running Pack Bound Zealots, you can run him with the Talon and just fish for sixes and get dev wounds. But a majority of the time, you're going to run Dracnian and you're just going to touch anything with that thing and it's going to kill it. But he's no longer all marks Abaddon. Like I've mentioned, he's mark locked now to Undivided, which does dramatically nerf his original potential. But again, it needed to happen because Abaddon back then was just scary. Like he did so much for what you got for him. He's incredibly annoying if you've got Death Jesters and Vindicare Assassins because they will look at him and they will go, right, he is dead, which is trash, unfortunately. But again, you can remedy this. You can slap him in a Land Raider if you want to get 5 Chosen. I wouldn't run him with 10 Chosen because at that point you're paying about 530 points for a unit of 10. Sorry, 11 because Abaddon's in it. But you can just bring like Terminators instead, and you'd still save it. But I do think Abaddon is best ran with 5 Chosen because you only want the Chosen for Bodyguard and for Advance and Charge, basically, or fall back and shoot and charge rather, or fall back, shoot, advance and charge. It's just they've just chosen a grip. Again, like I've mentioned, he is pretty well priced now. I think you're definitely going to see him. 280 points is like a sweet spot. I think it's just great because ultimately, let's be realistic here. You can bring him with 5 Chosen, like I've mentioned. Assault ramp on the Land Raider because he's Terminator. You can't bring him in anything else. You get disembark and charge. You can put the Land Raider behind a wall, disembark through it, then advance and charge after you've moved, which gives him a quite frankly a ridiculous threat range. But he does have the advance and fall back and shoot and charge, etc., which does give him secondary play. So, for example, if you want to just fall back and do an action, you can do. Abaddon will probably survive that, but again, it's there if you need to do it because at the end of the day, it's a scoring game. His buffing is ridiculous as well. So if again, Abaddon does have full rerolls to hit for anyone that's within 6 inches of him, or he can give him the 4-up invul, which is fantastic if you bring him with the Chosen, because the Chosen unit will then get the 4-up invul on his Bodyguard, which means that anything that's shooting him, he's basically shooting into a Terminator profile with -1 toughness. That's literally just it. It's fantastic because you most of the time, if you're shooting a Terminator, it's going to be a 4-up invul anyway. So they act as like a bootleg Terminator bodyguard for him. I just think he is fantastic. A lot of people don't like him, which I can get. I understand the logic, but I think Abaddon in my games, especially, is just a very, very potent threat that my opponent has to deal with. He can't just ignore Abaddon, especially now his maneuverability's gone through the roof with advance and charge. That being said, though, he also has CP regeneration with Dark Destiny. So again, it's not as good as it used to be, where you used to get it on a 2-up. If you get a 7-up leadership after you've Dark Pact, or you get 7 or higher on the leadership after you've Dark Pacted, you get a command point back, which is nice. Because unlike Space Marines, where you get CP for literally just existing, Chaos Space Marines unfortunately have to work for it. So, for example, like Master of Executions, you need to kill a character. Oh, 1 second. Sorry, I just had to sneeze. My apologies. But yeah, Master of Executions for the command point for killing a character. There's always a caveat to it, but Abaddon's is actually pretty reliable. Uh, Overall, though, you will see him. his durability is absolutely atrocious for what you're paying for him, but he is a damage dealer and an army amplifier, and he can have that damage or durability amplification for your army, which, in addition to the CP regen, I think warrants him as being a definite consideration. Because even people were still bringing Abaddon to the table now, so the fact that he's 15 points cheaper means you can basically throw an enhancement or something on, or even bring another unit, because cumulatively a majority of the units that this guy is with and other units in general have gone down, so you could probably bring like another unit, god knows what, in addition to bringing Abaddon, which is fantastic. Next up is the Obliterators. So Obliterators have Nick from AOW really fucking hates Obliterators, and I can't say I blame him, because they are very swingy. Sometimes they will delete anything, sometimes they will just do jack shit and they'll do no damage. Um, but Liam VSL recently has won a grand tournament at London, so congratulations to Liam VSL for that. So now, well, it's fair to say your average player would not probably see that much success. It's important to note that when played optimally by a good player, that they are very strong. The big issue with them is that they tend to hit really hard once, and then they basically blow the load early and they just do nothing. So you can potentially get 2 shooting turns out of them, but again, they are 4-inch movement, which is ridiculous. So I'll mention the cons to them before I mention the positives. So you don't get access to the Melter 2 from Deep Strike anymore because of the wording. It has to be under half of the shooting guns, the weapons range, it has to be under half. So when you deep strike, it's not technically, because of the base size, it's like 0.5 inches away extra. It's 9 inches away, and then the base size. So that base size is what gives them the ability to not use the Melter 2 from deep strike anymore, unfortunately. Uh, but again, you still, like, its strength is 4 damage, man. Like, come on. But it's still pretty bad, because originally people used to just deep strike these guys and then just shoot tanks or vehicles or knights off the board with them, which again is that extra 6. Moving it to 6 damage is pretty nasty. 4 damage is like, it's okay. And they're very, very slow. So again, the majority of the range of the weapons is 24 inch and 18 inches, so you want to make sure that these guys stay there. So you could run them with Renegades, in all honesty. Like, I do think that they have a place there. But again, to remedy that, a majority of the time they are very, very slow. But yeah, so just to run through, their output for potential damage, much like the Vindicator, is wild. It's not as high as the Vindicator, but it's pretty close. So you've got the heavy profile at 18-inch range, Melter 2, D3 shots each, hitting on 3s, strength 12, minus 3 AP, 4 damage flat. Medium, which is the blast one, that's 24-inch range, D6 shots, hitting on 3s, strength 8, minus 2, 2 damage. This is fantastic into Space Marines because of the AP being at AP2. And the light one, which is the chaff clearer, base kit sustained hits 1, D6 plus 3 shots, hitting on 3s, strength 5, minus 1 AP, 1 damage. So you've got 160 points for 2, so it's 80 points per model. Originally, it used to be 170. Liam VSL in his list ran 2 units of 2, like I've mentioned. The reason as to why he ran them was apparently because these guys can deep strike in and shoot something off an objective and then stick on that objective next turn. He ran them with Veterans of the Long War, which I believe you get the Focus of Hatred on these guys. Rerolling all your hits on that unit allows them to, having full rerolls to hit on Obliterators is quite frankly ridiculous. Like, it's so much damage. Granted, it depends on the shots that you're getting, because if you roll 1s and 2s on D3 shots, you're losing out on 4 damage per shot with that. But again, if you roll, like, you get a maximum of 6 shots per 2, which is really, really good. Especially, that's going to wound anything pretty much and do a shitload of damage to it. Either way, though, like I said, I think you'll see these guys a lot in Renegade Raiders for that extra AP when they're shooting onto an objective with the indirect fire. Granted, they do get +1 to the save when they are indirect, and they will hit on 4s. However, the extra AP kind of nullifies that +1 to the save. So unless they're willing to spend a command point for Armor of Contempt or a similar stratagem, they are going to be sat at whatever save it is that they've got. So, for example, if I'm shooting at a unit that's on an objective and I'm using the Melter gun, let's say it's a tank and it's on an objective, and I'm out of range, I want to use indirect fire because I don't want that thing to shoot me back. It'll be AP -2, but then it goes back to AP -3 because the tank's on the objective and Renegade Raiders gives you that extra AP. So they do get +1 to the save, but then you counter it with Renegade Raiders, which is why Renegade Raiders is really good. In addition, you do get advance and shoot with these guys because they do get assault on all their weapons base kit, which is very good. So you can potentially get between 5 to 10 inches of movement on them, which is a majority of the time you're going to be rolling 2s and 3s, so you get double movement on these guys, and then the ability to come outside of cover or into a line of sight and then just shoot the shit out of pretty much anything in way. Having the ability to advance into melter range is great. So you deep strike them behind a wall, move them around the wall next turn, advance, shoot, and then if that doesn't die, you can run these guys into combat. They have, I think it's like 4 attacks each or 3 attacks each, strength 9 -2 damage, which is actually pretty good. But either way, you might see 1 or 2 units of these guys. Like I said, Liam VSL did really well with them. Not saying everyone else can. I for certainly, for one, can't because I don't particularly. I want to enjoy these guys, but I think due to the nature of the shooting being so swingy, sometimes you get disheartened. When you pop off, it feels great, but then when you're not popping off and you get below average, which does happen, you're not going to enjoy them. But either way, I do think that Obliterators are a lot better now, and you might see 1 unit, maybe 2. Next up is Warp Talons. So these guys they were going to be the biggest winner on the list if it wasn't for a certain someone. But Warp Talons at the moment are very, very strong now. So 5 of them now cost 125 points. So you again, the way it works is Games Workshop looked at the 10-man unit for 270 points and were like, right, that's fair, but 5-man unit doesn't do half as much damage. It can still kill pretty decently, like into crappy chaff units and skirmishers and infantry screens. But a majority of the time, the 10-man unit would probably delete whatever it touched. If it was like infantry or even elite infantry, the 10-man Warp Talon unit would go in, kill it, and then just jump out. So the way now is a 10 points cut is a solid improvement. Everyone's aware of how Warp Talons are strong, well, strength wise, they're really good. You've got a 5-man unit throwing 4 attacks each at strength 5 -2 AP 1 damage with twin linked, so that's just really strong. If you're running Focus of Hatred into it, you get 4 rolls to hit. If you're on an objective, you get AP -3 potentially with Renegade Raiders. Dread Talons, you can get the extra AP from the Battle Shocking, and these guys will just shred any backline objective holders pretty reliably. So just to more look into a bit more in depth on their actual damage, you can run them with Pat Bound with Marcus Lanesh, which is very common. You get Advance and Charge and Dart Packs on a 5-up for sustained hits, which is great. So you can spike that damage and get full rerolls to wound as well. Again, veterans to long war, full free rolls to hit on the Focus of Hatred, and base kit rerolls to wound is very reliable. And that Renegade Raid is giving them advance and charge, +1 to charge if their opponent's on an objective, which is great. AP -3, and if you need to, you can give them precision, which means you can scour and seize. So a unit of 5 could run a unit on an objective with a character you need to kill, like a lieutenant, for example, with fire discipline. These guys will just run up to him and just shred him. But I think you'll see 1 or 2 squads of 5. So the logic behind this is, and this is something I want people, because if you're still here, thank you for watching. But this is what I want people to take away from this with Warp Talons, which is why I think they're the second best winner from this data slate. You're not going to bring 270 points worth of Warp Talons. You're going to bring 250 points worth, because what you're going to do is you're going to run a squad 2 squads of 5 instead of 1 squad of 10. So the only benefit that the squad of 10 would get is that it'd cost less command points to rapid ingress them. You can simply deep strike the 2 5-man squads in, even if it's in the same position, because you can still do wherever 10 Warp Talons can fit as a 10-man, they're going to fit as 2 5s anyway. So you can drop these guys down, advance them up, charge whatever you're fighting with both of them, and then once it's dead, you can basically just send it off the table. So, for example, you can run the 5-man in, kill the unit, and then the other 5-man go and kill the characters that are attached to the unit. And then, because both of the units are not within engagement range of an enemy, you can just take them off the board. It does the exact same thing, somewhat better, some would say, but you've just got to play a bit differently to get the same effect from it. And if you do, you're saving 20 points and have the option to place them down in future to, score objectives, to tag an objective that your opponent has to come off to contest you on the mid board to get a secondary. You can deep strike them down. Granted, you will have to be a lot more aware of screens against these guys, because obviously deep striking them in is going to be a bit difficult. There are still ways that players and competent players will be able to stop you from doing that, but there are ways to counter that counter, for lack of a better word, which is why I think Warp Talons at the moment are an incredibly usable unit. I think they are very good. Please run them in 2 squads of 5, and do not run them as a squad of 10, and make sure that you are just paying attention to whatever game it is you're playing. If you need them to deal damage, they can do it. If they need to score secondaries, you can also do that too. But yeah, they're just really, really good. Next up is the Terminator Sorcerer, another personal favourite of mine. I personally believe he is now the best HQ unit to lead Terminators in terms of points efficiency. So the Terminator Lord, I believe, is 95 points now still. This guy's 15 points cheaper, which is great because you can just basically slap an enhancement on him for free and you probably get the same points cost. Granted, while the Terminator Lord base kit, if you don't bring him with an enhancement, which a majority of the time you are wanting to bring him, so the original loadout I had for my veterans list was Eager for Vengeance on the Terminator Lord, which brought him up to, I think it was 110, I want to say 115, I'm not sure, around that. Whereas with this guy, you can put it on him and it'll bring him up to about 100 now, 105. So you're saving quite a lot. This guy is basically a big damage dealer, because originally the reason why he brought the Lord over this guy was because you don't get the free stratagems on the Sorcerer, you only get it on the Lord. So the Terminator Lord gives that -1 CP, so you can do fall back and shoot in Veterans of the Long War, for example, and then you get the Dev Wounds on one of the stratagems, which is great. But again, this guy is just stupidly hard hitting. So you get rerolls to advance and rerolls to charge. So if you're running them with Renegade Raiders, which is what I do now for the Emperor's Children, you do get a very reliable way to not exactly get auto 6-inch advance like you can do, but you do get a very, very reliable advance roll a majority of the time, and having the ability to re-roll your charge rolls as well is just really good, especially on Terminators, where you can use charges to springboard the unit forward or fall them back, and it just opens up their threat range a lot more. But the main reason you are bringing him is for the AP -1 from every incoming source. So basically, you point at a unit within 12 inches that you can see on this guy. You then have everything on the map on your army does -1 AP into him, which is very, very, very strong. Uh, Especially in Renegade Raiders, if something's on an objective, it means that everything incoming to it is now -2 AP, which is quite frankly ridiculous. Uh, Terminators with -1 AP extra on every melee weapon they've got brings a majority of the melee weapons up to AP -3. So the Power Fists are now AP -3. Your Accursed weapons are AP -3. You just hit stupidly hard. I had a 10-man unit, I remember, in a game against my good friend Joe. He played Admech. He ran a knight. I forgot which one it was. It was a big one of about 400 odd points in Admech. And I charged the unit of 10-man Terminators into the knight with this guy and did Death Hex and everything. Just to clarify as well, Death Hex only goes off on a 2-up, so sometimes you can roll a 1 and you D3, you take 3 mortal wounds flat, which is kind of meh, but it is what it is. Majority of the time, that's going to go off. You now, instead of having them save up on a 5-up, you're now making the thing save on a 6-up in melee, because it only gets the 5-up invul at range. It killed the knight in one go. I think it took like 25 to 24 wounds off, and it had 24 wounds anyway. So it just killed it straight away, and it's definitely worth it, because that knight, Jesus Christ, that knight gives me nightmares. No pun intended. But yeah, it shows up the weaknesses of Terminators. Obviously, Terminators are naturally a very slow unit due to how sluggish and heavy they are. So having rerolls to advance and charge, and access to advance and charge in Renegade Raiders is really good. Same with Packbound, especially if you're running them with Marcus Lanesh, which is what you're probably going to want to be doing with. This guy's shooting's actually pretty good. So it's D6 shots at strength 6 if you're overcharging, -2 AP, -3 usually, because the majority of the time you are shooting at whatever it is that you've death hexed. And it's D3 damage per shot with dev wounds. You can kill quite a lot of stuff with this thing and take a lot of wounds off tanks if you do roll hot on the 6s, because it's D3 dev wounds, which is, again, bodyguard units fucking hate this. Anything with a 4-up invul just despises dev wounds. It's very good into Terminators, Custodies, Victrix Guard for Calgar, anything like that. It's just good at killing stuff. He's quite durable for his points cost. He's not as durable as the Lord, which is like -1 damage, half incoming damage, and 3 armor and contempt if you need it. But he's T5, 5 wounds, 2 up armor, 4 up invul, and you get to blank a damage instance to 0 with his Chaos Familiar. This is very, very good. And it works against assassins, so if the Vindicator shoots at this guy, you can just blank a shot. Because it's a damage instance. You can just ignore it, which is very good. His ability, again, like I've said, it's useful for your army. So you've got to think from so the way I play and the way I think of when I'm building a list and I'm looking at it and I'm like, what can this leader do for the unit and what can this leader do for the army? The Terminator Sorcerer Lord, the -1 AP doesn't just benefit the unit he's on, it benefits the army. So your bolt guns are now AP -1 into whatever it is he's targeted. Everything else in that extra AP, maybe AP2 base kit, because of the fact that you're probably going to be shooting stuff on objectives. If not, you get extra AP anyway is always good. You're never going to complain about extra AP. This guy benefits the unit. He benefits the army. He's just a super, super good unit and a great model. So it's a massive improvement to the damage of CSM, even if it's increasing the AP by 1 on a unit. It's just really good. Slap that on Renegade Raiders, it's AP2 base kit. Slap it with Veterans of the Long War and your Focus of Hatred, your full reroll hits. Your Abaddon, full reroll to hit, -1 AP on everything. It's just, -1 AP on the target you're shooting at. It's just, it's so, so useful and allows you to get that damage through that you otherwise wouldn't get through. So, like I've said here, it kills chaff really easily due to the fact that most chaff are on like a 5 up or a 6 up. So if you put this on Cultist and you get any wounds through, it just kills them. If you put it on Guardsmen, like a unit of 10 or 20, they're now saving on a 5 up, maybe on a 6 up if they don't get cover. It's really strong. Great into vehicles, so it can cancel out cover saves with it. So most anti-vehicle fires AP -2 or AP3, bringing that up to AP4. For example, if you're bringing Havocs with las cannons and you shoot a tank and this guy points the AP at it, tank can use armor contempt. It might get cover, but ultimately it's going to be on a 5 up or a 6 up it's saving on. Otherwise, they don't get a save and the damage will just go straight through. In my opinion, I do think you'll be seeing at least one. I have decided to replace the Terminator Lord with this guy. This guy did do better than the Terminator Lord in majority of the times, but I think the Terminator Lord's better for utility. This guy is better for damage. I do think Terminators are going to be seen more, and as a result, this guy's probably going to get brought. A majority of the time, people don't bring Terminators with HQs anyway because of the price, but I think the Terminator Sorcerer Lord is definitely something you consider because he is so, so, so good. Like I said, the previous points cuts mean that he's gone down by 10 points. Terminators have gone down by 10 points. It's 20 points for you to play with, pretty much. You've got an enhancement for free. You can bring it's just so, so useful. Or you can just screw the enhancement and you get 20 points free that you can use elsewhere in your army, which then would stack with the other cumulative decrease in points which the armies, a majority of my units have got. I've got like 50 points extra, so that's like what, a squad of cultists that you can just throw on a backline objective and just be like, yeah, just okay. I'll just bring another squad of cultists and just put them next to the squad of cultists I was already bringing and just screen the shit out of the backline so they've got no deep strike. They're just extremely good. And I think this in particular is a very good change. However, we do need to address another elephant in the room, which I'm sure many people have been waiting on. The biggest loser, unfortunately, is the Accursed Cultist. These guys got butchered. I still think I'll be honest, I was reading it, I was like 195 points for 16 is wild. They still cost 90 if you run them in squads of 8, but a majority of the time these guys are better if you run them as a bigger unit. Due to the stratagem buffs and all this other stuff, and Cursed Cultist being just in general better if you run them as a big man unit, a big 16-man unit. Sorry. Again, like I said here, While the squad of 8 still cost 90, Accursed Cultists are usually run as a max squad due to their effectiveness. A squad of 16 now costs 195 points when they used to be 180. That's an extra 45 points if you're running 3 16-man squads. In addition to this, the Dark Commune also went up in points, so a full squad would now cost 275 points as opposed to the previous 245. This isn't counting for enhancements like Warp Foresight for the Scout 6-inch, the Incendiary Good for the +1 strength and +1 attack if you're below half strength, or the Cultist Brand, which gives them the reroll, advance, and charge rolls. Nerf to the Surge rule as well, on top of this, is also bad news. A majority of the time, your opponent wouldn't be able to chew through the unit unless the unit has focused them down with some serious firepower, and by the time they've finished doing that, the Accursed Cultist could usually end up in combat with something else or have been killed. Now they can only make a surge move once per phase, so it'll be 1d6 movement per shooting phase, as a potentially 2 to 3d6. I believe this is massively limiting their movement capabilities, even if they are ran with the Dark Commune. A majority of the time, the Surge move was actually wild in terms of the amount of movement you actually got from these guys, because Scout 6-inch, running in and just, potentially through attrition, just taking the hits on the mutants and then running the torments in and just shredding whatever it is you're fighting with advance and charge, +1 to hit, +1 to wound. Um, I do think they are still part of our strongest combo. So obviously the AC/DC combo, you could run it in Renegade Raiders and still do shitloads of damage. But obviously it's a cultist and a damned unit, so it's probably best to be run with um, the Chaos Cultist detachment. Uh, they're still really nasty, but I do think like it's just so much like just so much more points. Like it's not like, oh, it's like 5 or 10. It's a huge increase. So like 30 points base kit. Like that's a full squad 275 times 3. If you're running 3 DAT commune sorry, 3 ACDC units, that's a lot of points. It's like, I think it's like 90 extra points. It's ridiculous. And then you've got to take into account for enhancements. So you're paying 100 odd extra points in cultists, which means that that's like what, 2 squads of 10 cultists or a traitor guardsman squad or whatever. So they've still kept the Scout 6-inch roll and the 6-up Feel No Pain. And if they ran with the Dark Commune, they'll still have that 5-up invul and leadership rerolls. Like I said, they are still very, very strong. They're not bad at all. The biggest kick to the stomach, or kicks rather, is the points increase to both the HQ and the models in the unit for the Accursed Cultist, and the nerf to the Surge rule. Granted, the Surge rule was pretty broken and it could be abused, but I do think that the Accursed Cultists are still going to see play. I just don't think that you're going to see as many because you physically cannot bring as many as you originally could be. They're probably going to, you know, budget, for lack of a better word, and just bring a Dark Apostle instead, and get the +1 to wound all game, essentially. But the majority of the time with Cultists, you just throwing units at the board and hoping some of them stay alive. It's a board control army, not a kill army. But yeah, unfortunately, Accursed Cultist got the sharp end of the stick and are currently sat impaled, costing more points than they should do. So finally, we'll end this video on a high note. The biggest winner, Vashtorr. A lot of people seem to think this guy was trash for a while until he got his rework, and now he's actually pretty good. He's even better. So he's cheaper than a Demon Prince with wings now. He fills a very similar role because he can deep strike and charge. And he hits a lot harder on average usually. So again, he's very good in every detachment, but I think he stands out in Soulforge Warpack as giving demon vehicles +1 strength to the weapons within 6 inches. This applies to both melee and range. So basically, you run up all your vehicles. When you're about to set up in, turn 2, turn 3, deep strike this guy in behind a wall or something, or on the battlefield next to the castle units that you're wanting to keep him in. And then he gets the 6-inch aura of +1 to strength at shooting. So Forge Fiends are now strength 11 for shooting. Mauler Fiend shooting is now strength, I think it's strength 10. So you got strength 10 melters, which is pretty nasty. And then they get +1 strength in melee as well, which is great. Defiler cannons are strength 11. It's just really good. But he also has quite a funny rule, which a majority of the time people don't seem to like, are not worried about. So, for example, if you're within 18 inches and you're shooting him, your opponent has to take a hazardous test on the amount of models that I've shot at him. So, for example, if you think, oh, there's a 10-man unit, I don't know, Legionaries, and they want to shoot Vashtorr with a last cannon because they're probably going to wound him and do damage. These guys will shoot, everything, because you're gonna want to shoot everything, and they'll shoot everything. Pistols, auto cannon, las cannons, bolt guns, whatever. They'll shoot, and then they have to take a hazardous test. And any ones, congratulations, you've just lost a legionary, which is quite funny. It's very, very strong. Like, a lot of people seem to not genuinely understand how your opponent has to think twice before shooting you, because you have to kill this thing, but is it worth risking potentially a majority, some units in some models in your unit? His damage is great, and he's exceptionally good at killing knights and other big vehicles. So his flamer's anti-vehicle 4 up at d6 shots, strength 5 -2 AP, 1 damage flat, which isn't too bad, but his melee is where it shines. So he's got 6 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 14, -2 AP, 3 flat damage each, and it's got dev wounds and anti-vehicle 4 up. So on any wound rolls of a 4 up, that's 3 dev wounds to whatever it is you're hitting if it's a vehicle, which is fucking ridiculous. His sweep attack's actually quite good as well. It can be better in certain circumstances as opposed to his his strike attacks. So the sweep's 14 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 8, 0 AP, 1 damage, but it has got anti-vehicle 4 up, so if you're looking to just plink a few dev wounds off a tank, instead of just, risking it with half the attacks, basically, you can probably just use this fish for 6s, or no, fish for 4 ups, and just get 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 dev wounds, and just kill whatever it is you've touched. A weakness, if I was to give him one, he is an epic hero, so he can't take enhancements. But again, this isn't really bad because the points cut, again, you can get 15 extra points in already expensive list, because this guy, you probably want to run him with Soulforge Warpack due to the buffs he gives your your demon vehicles. Again, that means it's a free enhancement on a Warpsmith. In my opinion, you've got them points to spend. You might as well spend them. This guy is scary good. I think he's really strong. He does everything. So he's a support character. Your opponent can't ignore him, because if they do, he's just going to run at him and punch him and kill them. Because he's got 12-inch move and fly, which is really good. He's got a risk of, you shoot me, I'm going to make you do hazardous, or he keeps your opponent has to stay away from him to avoid him, which then means that they're usually falling back or staying back on the field, which then means that you can take the mid board with a lot less problems. It's more of a defense in depth thing, where if your opponent falls back, kills it, and then charges. But the majority of the time, if they're falling back, it's not a good thing. You're establishing a lot more board control in that scenario, thanks to Vashtorr. But yeah, I think this guy is the best beneficiary from the recent balanced data slate. I think you will probably see Vashtorr in Soulforge Warpack lists a lot more now. The list were already quite expensive because Warpack obviously bring a lot of vehicles, and vehicles aren't cheap. And this guy just makes them a lot more potent, and he hits very, very hard. Great into, like I said, vehicles, just deletes vehicles. And again, strength 14 -2 AP, 3 damage flat, dev wounds on a 4 up if you're in a vehicle. This guy's just going to turn everything into a tin can if he smacks it. It's just wild. And his model is badass. Like, he's so cool. But to finalise that, thank you for watching, everybody. I appreciate your time here. If you've stayed for this long, congratulations. So if you feel like you've learned anything and I've warranted and kept your attention, then please like the video. And if you're considering subscribing, then please do. It's always nice to actually get to talk to people. If you feel like you've learned something, or if you feel like I've got something wrong, or I might have, misappropriated a rule somewhere, please comment your thoughts and corrections, and I will respond to every comment that I can do when it's possible. Talking with you guys is really good, and sharing different perspectives is the only way to learn and get better at the game. But with that said, everybody, I hope you have a great day or night wherever you are in the world. And as always, remember, praise the dark gods.